part in the Zamboanga Debate Open. And on behalf of the Xavier Boys team, we are thankful for this opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, first world nations seek to achieve an egalitarian society. This ideal is characterized by gender equity and respect for the multiplicity of gender roles that one can and would potentially access. Over the course of modern history, American society have achieved significant milestones in achieving this trajectory. The emergence of LGBT movements, women being allowed to occupy positions that were predominantly and historically allocated exclusively only for men, and in some states, ladies and gentlemen, civil unions of homosexuals are already allowed. This is extended to various social institutions, like our legal system protects individuals through anti-discrimination laws. It's opening room for women in public offices, ladies and gentlemen. Even media has become more holistic in their portrayal of women and homosexuals, which is a radical departure from their traditional gender roles. However, one of the most significant social institutions that plays a vital role in the socialization and values formation of the society has remained nonchalant to these trends. In primary schools, for example, ladies and gentlemen, boys are supposed to wear blue and they have to prefer blue, and women should prefer pink, ladies and gentlemen, or boys are supposed to play with guns and robots and girls have to play house and dolls. Never was it, ladies and gentlemen, that women and boys are supposed to interchange these things. This is further reinforced when they reach secondary level. Like for example, during prom, a boy would only be allowed to take a female partner in the prom, ladies and gentlemen, or even the subjects that they're taking. In home, women are supposed to take home economics, while as boys are supposed to take metallurgy or etc. It even affects the career choices that they're going to take in the future. Like for example, women are supposed to take teacher professions and boys are supposed to become engineers, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, these are a complete antithesis to the goals of the state the goals of the state that it has set for its society. We want to obliterate this culture and practice, ladies and gentlemen. There are a couple of things that I will talk about in my speech. The first is, what exactly does the state want? And the second thing that I will talk about is on the individual, how this affects the individual stakeholders here. And Gian would talk about, ladies and gentlemen, the gender narratives and how it's going to be affected by the policy of government. First, we think that the state wants a holistic development, no thank you, ladies and gentlemen, of its citizens. Institutions like parents and schools, ladies and gentlemen, are delegated to take this task, like the formation, socialization, and adopting of value systems of these particular individuals. The reason why the state does this is because the state can't personally do this. And it's designed to prepare individuals for when he or she goes out to the real world. We think that the school is failing in this aspect. Why is this? We think that there's a disjunct between what the state expects of these people and how they are formed in the schools. Like for example, the state tells them that they can be individuals that they choose to be. However, in schools, they are not allowed to exercise these particular choices because their choices are already predetermined. Like for example, if you're a boy and if you choose the color pink, obviously you're a deviant in that particular setup, and the teachers do not necessarily tolerate that. More often than not, they're going to scold you and going to tell you that you're not supposed to choose that, you're supposed to choose blue. And more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, the state wants these people to respect others regardless of genders. The fact that these people are already being conditioned to think that whatever actions that you're doing that is not designed by the school is a deviance affects how you're going to project the society in the future. It reinforces the narratives of oppressions of gender. Like for example, homosexuality is something that's wrong because it does not conform to what the state and what these individual schools have designed for these people. We think that's wrong. Or for example, girls have to stay at home and play mommy, ladies and gentlemen, if they do not belong in the environment dominated by men. Why are these things dangerous? Aside from the fact that it affects how these individuals deal with other people, it also fuels the rhetoric against feminist groups or against homosexual groups, ladies and gentlemen. Why are these things very important? Because these are the groups that propel the continued acceptance of the movement, ladies and gentlemen, and providing for more opportunities for these people. And without the grassroots support, ladies and gentlemen, that wouldn't be achieved. Let's try to target the next question then. Why do we focus primary and secondary education? Obviously, this is the formative years of these students, ladies and gentlemen. We think that gender is a fluid concept, ladies and gentlemen, and we want to facilitate gender liberty as early as this, because we think, ladies and gentlemen, that the concept of gender is something that's socially constructed, meaning you did not choose to be a boy, a girl, a gay, or a lesbian the moment you are born. The problem is you are indoctrinated to absorb gender roles without your active consent. Individual choices are a value that the state wants to protect at the end of the day, especially when it does not harm anyone and it has a very important role in your self-actualization in the future. Before I continue,
if your shopping list of dangers are true, why then are opportunities in the tertiary level as vibrant and accessible for all, regardless of gender?
Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why these options are there is because we have things like affirmative action and we have all the other things. But just because these options are there, it doesn't negate the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that a significant number of people still, ladies and gentlemen, are being indoctrinated in this particular manner. And this is particularly dangerous, especially when we're talking about, conservative states like Texas, for example, or those other places, ladies and gentlemen. But more importantly, we think that this is rather hypocritical on the part of the state to tell you that when you grow up, you have to have a lot of choices, and these choices are going to be accommodated because these choices are going to facilitate your holistic development and be the best person that you can be. But when you are still young, the state does not provide all these opportunities. But furthermore, why is this rather important? Because, ladies and gentlemen, it affects the identity formation of these people, and their inability to have access to this creates irreversible damages. Like what are these things? Your gender identity, ladies and gentlemen, affects your interaction with the future. Like, who are you going to date? Who are you going to go out with, ladies and gentlemen? Even the career choices that you want at the end of the day. Like, for example, am I allowed to become a teacher? Am I allowed to take roles that are predominantly for women? And all these things. Or even the neighborhood that you can live in, ladies and gentlemen. We think that if these are not achieved at the early stage, it's difficult, if not impossible, to correct. And we may agree that there are certain individuals who have been immune from these things and are well and fine, ladies and gentlemen. But just because there are people who are well and fine, it does not mean that we need to preclude and exclude certain individuals, especially when the state still recognizes and protects the vulnerable and the minorities. For all these reasons, ladies and gentlemen, the Savior Boys are very proud to propose.